Welcome everybody to today's micro lecture on law, EU law and religion. As you can see, this micro lecture is structured in the following way. We will deal with the question of non-discrimination, then also look into case law to see an example, and we will then also see to which extent the motto of the European Union, United in Diversity, can explain the situation or this relationship of EU law and religion. As you know, these guiding questions should make you reflect on those questions already by now, and as you know, they will be answered by the end of this course. So a question which you have already seen in other micro lectures, so what's the common ground of those different concepts, now also religion, the relationship of EU law and religion, the question discrimination based on religion, is that illegal or how is that handled? Which leads to the next question, what is the principle of proportionality? What does it stand for? In which way does it lead to the solution of such a case? And as already mentioned, the motto United in Diversity and what that means here in our context of EU law and religion. As you already know from other micro lectures, in the end, all those concepts, so law, values or justice, ethics, morality, also religion, in the end try to answer how humans should behave, how they should not behave. So that's an underlying objective of all those different fields. In the field of EU law, non-discrimination is a very important concept, and this does not only refer to non-discrimination of workers from other countries or products coming from other countries, but as we can see on that matrix, we also have the principle of non-discrimination based on various criteria in different fields. So you can see non-discrimination based on ethnic background, religion, disability, age, sexual orientation or gender. And as you can see, that applies in various fields such as employment. And if we take the first box, discrimination based on religion in the field of employment, that is where the European Court of Justice has decided some important cases. One case is the following. About a lady who started to work for a security company, and there was an unwritten rule that workers should not have visible signs reflecting their political, philosophical or religious beliefs in workplace. So this lady, after she started working in that company, informed the employer that she intends in the future to wear the Islamic headscarf during working hours. So what was an unwritten rule before has then also been approved as an amendment in the workplace regulations. And as you can see, in June 2006, she has been dismissed from work because she insisted on wearing the Islamic headscarf. So, as I mentioned it before, the question, can she claim to be discriminated based on her religion? In EU law, and we have already seen it, or the number of this EU directive in the matrix, this directive from 2000 is precisely on non-discrimination in the field of employment, if we talk about discrimination based on religion. The approach of the European Union is quite similar, as we can also find it elsewhere, that in this case religion is not defined as such in this EU directive, but it's clear that it has two components. So it's this what is called forum internum, so your inner belief, but also this forum externum, so that you can show your belief in the outside world, so to say. And when the Court of Justice had to decide that case, it tried to strike a balance the question in this case was, can it be justified if one person is prohibited from showing her religious belief in the outside, in this case via the Islamic veil? The Court of Justice has stated in this case, yes, it can be a legitimate aim to show or to follow a policy of religious neutrality. And as it was mentioned earlier, it's not only religious neutrality, it also refers to philosophical or political views. So this idea or this objective of this company has been accepted as such, but, and that's very important, it also has to be in line with the principle of proportionality. And proportionality is a key principle in EU law, which in the end defines if certain behavior is seen to be illegal from the EU perspective or legal. As you can see, there are two components. So first of all, the behavior or the measure following this objective of neutrality has to be appropriate. So it has to be applied in a consistent and systematic manner, which of course means if you would treat different religions in a different way, that would not be seen as consistent and as coherent. The second very important element of proportionality is this necessity test. So is there anything which is kind of less restrictive to achieve this objective? And again, this legitimate objective was that the employer can show to be neutral with regard also to religion. And here the question was, is it really necessary to dismiss her from work, or is there anything, any possibility which would allow the employer to be neutral with regard to his customers and other stakeholders, but at the same time would not have to dismiss the lady? And what the Court of Justice mentioned in that regard would be, for instance, that she would work in a back office where she does not have this customer contact. As you can see from this overview showing some cases of the Court of Justice, there have been two cases which have been decided on the very same day, one taking place in France, the other in Belgium. We can also see that there have been two cases from Germany. Very interesting cases where the ethos, so your inner disposition with regard to religion, was a requirement for hiring someone, or in the other case, a reason for firing someone. The one case was about the Catholic Caritas, the other one about the Protestant equivalent, the diaconie. There have also been cases about the slaughtering of animals, as you can see with regard to this regulation, and also religious beliefs, a Belgian and again a French case, where also the court had to find such a balance between those different requirements. The motto of the European Union, as you can see, is united in diversity. And I think it very well helps us to explain the approach of the European Union also in this context. So in which way do we find elements which we can refer to as being united, and where do we find some diversity? So if we start with diversity, it's mentioned in the Charter of Fundamental Rights, so the EU's human rights document, that the EU should respect the diversity of the cultures and traditions of the people living in Europe, but also the national identities of the member states. We can find the same idea in the Treaty on the European Union, respecting history, culture and traditions, linguistic diversity, and so on. So there are some key arguments in those key documents referring to diversity, but as you can see, at the same time, we also find arguments for this united perspective. So we have this reference to peaceful future based on common values. we have a reference to the spiritual and moral heritage, so also making it more united because we have common roots, so to say, and the same also mentioned in the Treaty on the European Union. Now, if we look at this spiritual and moral heritage, which is mentioned in the Charter of Fundamental Rights, it's very important to look back in history and to get to know more about the development when this wording was drafted. There were some, I may quote, translated from this German text, there were some highly emotional disputes in this convention drafting the Charter of Fundamental Rights, because it was not acceptable for some, for example France, to have a reference to God or religion, because it's a country which strictly separates politics from religion. Others wanted to have references to religion, so that's why this wording has been found, the spiritual and moral heritage, so that EU law does not have to refer to religion, because that was not acceptable for some. As you can see, this wording is no confession for a certain religion, also not for some religions. It should also not be seen as excluding some religion, for instance, Islam, and also atheists and agnostics should be taken into consideration. Now, talking about values, it's also very interesting not only to see what we can find in legal texts, but also if we look at the attitudes of Europeans. And there have been some very interesting Eurobarometer surveys, so EU-wide surveys asking about the attitudes of EU citizens. And as you can see, there have been surveys during various years, so from 2007 until 2012. Unfortunately, then those surveys have stopped on these questions. And the first slide now is about the personal values of Europeans. So you can see that peace, respect for human life and human rights over the years have constantly been ranked top, whereas respect for other cultures and religion have been constantly ranked low as personal values of Europeans. On the other hand, if you compare the two slides, I find it very interesting what EU citizens deem to be the values representing the European Union. And if we compare the two slides, you can see indicated in red that respect for human life is lower, referring to the EU, not to personal values, whereas human rights, democracy, the rule of law, and respect for other cultures are also are ranked higher. What is constantly ranked very low is religion, and I think that also can help to explain those disputes when the Charter of Fundamental Rights was drafted at the time. So the relationship of EU law and ethics, which is a philosophical concept, or morality, of course has some common grounds also with religion, but I think it's very important to keep in mind those Eurobarometer surveys and also the debates in the European Convention in order to understand this relationship of EU law and religion. So that's the literature mentioned on the slides, and now you know. So the common ground of all those concepts that I've just mentioned, of course, in the end is to determine what's the right thing to do, how humans should behave. Now, looking at the relationship of EU law and religion, I've just mentioned that there is no reference to God or religion in the Charter of Fundamental Rights. Later on, in the Treaty on the European Union, there was a reference to religion integrated. We've also seen those Eurobarometer surveys where religion constantly ranked very low, both as personal values, but also as values representing the European Union. We do find a provision, Article 17 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, which mentions that the Union has to respect and does not prejudice the status under national law of churches and religious associations or communities in the member states. But this statement on respecting the status of those religious communities does not mean that those communities can discriminate against people based on their religious belief. So in other terms, religion does not escape from the general requirements of EU law, which again is non-discrimination together with the principle of proportionality. And we have seen the directive which prohibits discrimination based on religion, and those cases that have been mentioned on the slide. Again, proportionality is a very important principle which has certain elements, so appropriateness, so the need to pursue this objective, if it's a legitimate objective, in a consistent and coherent manner, and very important, the necessity test to find out whether there are less restrictive measures which still would allow us to achieve this objective. What is the common ground between EU law and public morality on the one hand and EU law and religion on the other hand? In either case, EU law allows for some leeway, so some freedom or flexibility, if you like. In case of morality, which is part of another micro-lecture, it's very important to emphasize that member states can determine their concept of morality, but double morality would not be accepted. And here in the field of the relationship EU law and religion, we have seen that the general principle of non-discrimination also applies in this field. And although the status of such religious community is respected, this, on the other hand, does not mean that they would be allowed to discriminate. And we have also seen the motto of the European Union, which of course is valued, which is valid as such, so in general. But I think we have also seen that that it very well describes the status quo of this relationship of EU law and religion, that we have some elements which we can consider to be united, but that there can also be some diversity. Thank you for watching and see you next time.